for 180. Welcome to week 5. This week I am sitting in my kitchen because it's really stormy outside and I'm trying to get as much light as possible, and it's even not that great. So you can see all the mess. It's very exciting. We are going to be talking about contemporary poetry this week, which is one of my favorite subjects. I hope you'll like it. I think the stuff that we're going to be reading is pretty accessible, meaning it's easy to get into. It shouldn't require a whole lot of analyzing and trying to figure things out. It should be pretty straightforward. So what you're going to do this week is watch a thing. Well, it's a podcast with some visuals about how to read and interpret poetry, talking about what are the things you look for, what are the things that you can say about a poem, how do we talk about it, how do we discuss it. If some of the terms seem unfamiliar, metaphor, simile, those kinds of things, jot them down as you're watching and then look them up. There's a resource under our courses page called Literary Devices, and you can look them up and figure out what those are. So do watch that with a pen and paper in hand so that you can make notes of terms that you may not know, and that way you can learn them and become familiar with them. Then you're going to do some readings. I've got a bunch of poems to read. And a lot of them have a YouTube video to go with it to see the poet actually reading the piece. Most all of the work that you're going to be reading this week has been written in the last 10 years. Some of it's a little older, but for the most part it's quite new, and a lot of it's been, I have some that's just been published this year. I have 2 or 3 of them that are just this year. So you're going to start by reading everyone's favorite poet, a guy named Billy Collins. You're going to be doing a lot of work with what Billy Collins thinks this week. He's a very plain-spoken guy, and very, very exciting. Look, there's me and Billy Collins. Yes, that's like 2006 or 2007. He looks very excited to see me, and I was very excited to see him. So this is one of my treasured pictures of my life because he's a famous poet. Anyway, you're going to read Billy Collins' 2 of his poems. The first one's called Introduction to Poetry. And it's a really great poem because it sums up how poetry should be read, which is not to just, try to pick it apart to destroy it, but enjoy it. And then he has a poem called The Lanyard, which is about mothers and sons, mothers and children, and what mothers give their kids and what kids give in return. Maybe I'm biased because I have kids, so I like that one. So read The Lanyard. Then you're going to read 3 poems by a guy named Brian Turner, and they come from this book called Here Bullet. And this book came out in, I think, 2005, 2004, and it's about him serving in Iraq, in the Iraq War. And he writes about that experience, and some of the poems are pretty brutal. Fair warning, one of them does contain swearing. We can talk about that, whether you think that's appropriate, whether it's not, in a war setting. So there's 3 poems in there. This book was really kind of groundbreaking when it came out. I came across it within a year or so after it came out, and we had just gone to war in Iraq, and here was this guy with a collection of poetry about it, so it felt very fresh, very new. I especially picked this one and the next writer because currently Iraq is going to pieces, and if you're following the news, that may have some interest or shed some light on it. So read the 3 poems from Here Bullet, and then you're going to go into this one, which I'm also excited about. I've read very little. It's called Letter Composed During a Lull in the Fighting by a guy named Kevin Powers. About a year or 2 years ago, his novel called The Yellowbirds won all sorts of awards, and it's a novel about the Iraq War. I have not read it, but it's supposed to be phenomenal, so grab that if you've got extra time. This is his first collection of poetry, and I happened to win it on Goodreads, so that was really super exciting because it came autographed. And so I haven't even read the whole thing. I pulled a couple poems that I came across because he served in Iraq at the same time as Brian Turner, but this book is coming out 10 years later. I don't know if there's something to be learned from that. 2 experiences that are very, current, have a lot of meaning right now. So look at those, read through those by Kevin Powers. Then you're going to read a couple poems by a guy named Adrian Matejka. Adrian Matejka teaches at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, I think. He's a young guy, young for me. He's probably in his early 40s. He has written 3 collections of poetry. His second collection was called Mixology, and you'll read 1 poem from that one. And the whole book really deals a lot with what does it mean to be mixed race. He's half black, half white, and he talks a lot about what that means to be kind of juggling these 2 different cultures. And he also does a lot in that collection with rap and hip hop music. So if you like it, you enjoy that, you think that's something you're interested in, I definitely recommend grabbing the book or Googling and trying to find more of the poems from that collection. The second poem you're going to read by him is called Battle Royale. And that's from his newest collection, which is called The Big Smoke. And it won a ton of awards last year. And the whole book, the whole collection of poetry is written from the voice of a guy named Jack Johnson, who was an African-American boxer in the early 1900s and the son of slaves. So kind of a really interesting spot. And he writes the whole book in the poem in the voice of that boxer. So grab, if you like that, there's lots of those out there as well. Then you're going to read two poems by a woman named Mary Sizebit, and I'm probably murdering her name. One of them comes from this book called Incarnadine, which is her newest book. It won the National Book Award last year. She beat out Adrian Matejka. People like me, we follow these things. It's sort of our Super Bowl. You're going to read one from here and then one from her earlier collection as well. And then finally, you're going to read a couple poems by one of my favorite writers. Her name is Jane Kenyon. And this collection is called Let Evening Come. These are a little bit older. Jane Kenyon died, I want to say, in the late 90s of cancer. I actually came across her while I was a student at Dorr, and one of her poems, which you'll read, is my absolute favorite poem of all times. She struggled a lot with depression in her life and kind of dealing with that darkness. It comes out in a lot of her work. And then also she did die of cancer, and she was quite young when she did die. So there's a couple poems by Jane Kenyon. So those are the ones you're going to read. You're going to listen to files if there's files available. As you're listening to them and watching them perform their pieces, because in a sense that's what we do with poems, we perform them. Take a look at them, how they're reading. What do you notice about it? Because you're going to be doing an assignment in a little while about reading a poem out loud. So kind of think through that as you're listening and looking at those poems. Once you've gone through the assigned poems, I want you to go to the Poetry 180 website, and I've included a link for that. Basically, Billy Collins, see, look at that, he keeps coming up. A few years ago, he put together a site with 180 poems. The idea was one poem for every day of the school year. And so he picked poems that were accessible, they're pretty short, they're easy to read, and most of them are pretty contemporary. Most of them are, under 20 years old. Poke through that site. Read through a bunch of poems. Spend some time looking at them. You don't have to read every poem on there, but find a few. And then find one that you really like. And read through it a couple times. And then I want you to email me. Kind of like a personal response and say, hey, I read this poem by so-and-so, and this is what I really, really liked about it. And think about paragraph. I want to know what you read, but make sure you tell me the title and the author so I can go and refer to it too when I respond to you. Then you're going to do some stuff with how to read poetry out loud. There's a link for Billy Collins, there he is again, writing about how to read a poem out loud. Watch another video with me. Maybe I'll move to a different part of my house to record that one. And then you're going to pick a poem. And it could be the same one that you write about, that you emailed me about. It can be a different one. But pick from that Poetry 180 site. Those are great, easy, quick ones to do. And record yourself with that poem, reading it out loud. You can do an audio file. You can do a YouTube video. You can upload it. And there are instructions on how to do that on the Courses at Dordt page under your online orientation. If you've never done that before, if I can do it, you can probably do it because I'm not very good with that. If you run stuck, don't wait till the last second to do that. I'll talk to you a little bit about that. Well, I can mention that. Week 6, I'm going to have some spotty internet access. So try to look at that if you could before Friday night this week, and that way I can help you out if there's a problem ahead of time, because I'll be leaving Saturday and kind of be iffy for a couple days there. So you'll do that. And then the last thing that you really need to do, you'll need to do your discussion board. And then working on your poetry paper. If you haven't started that, start doing that. Let's make a deal. It was supposed to be due at the end of week 6, I believe. That seems really, really soon to me, because that just gives you week 5 and week 6 to really work on it. So let's make that due at the end of our break, but it's totally optional if you want to work on it over your break or not. But it'll be due then at the beginning of week 7, so I think that's Monday the 7th. Let's make that poetry paper due Monday the 7th. That does mean that whole week that we're off on vacation, you have to work on it. Once again, though, if you want to take it off, you'll have to, get it done ahead of time. if that's the case. If you're running stuck with that poetry paper, let me know. There's lots of good resources on our courses at Dort page under course documents that can really help you out. There's a list of poems to choose from under the instructions. If one of those doesn't appeal to you and you want to try something else, let me know. And shoot me an email. We can touch base on what you decide to do. So that's the week in a nutshell. Trying to keep it under 10 minutes. Did not succeed. You'll see me again when we talk about reading poems out loud. But let me know if you have any questions or problems or run stuck, and we'll see you again later.